I am so excited to have this conversation with Lolly Gwabavu, who is a pioneer in leadership development. Lolly has been on a leadership journey for over 20 years. Lolly, you started out as an HR manager in Barlow World Equipment and you've navigated across various blue chip organizations, right from industrial mining to financial services. And you currently head up leadership development in a major bank. And to add to your set of accomplishments, you've just completed your MPhil in change leadership, looking at the topic we're going to be discussing today, which is around self-identity and leadership development. So Lolly, welcome, and I'm really looking forward to this topic, which has so much relevance to how we are developing leaders.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that welcome, Deidre. It's always interesting when you hear people play back a little bit of who you say you are. Like, she sounds pretty cool.
Definitely.
So thank you for that. And then just the surname is Gwabavu. I know it's a tongue twister, so yeah, I get a lot of nicknames. Yeah, so it's Lolly Gwabavu. And thank you so much for this time, this opportunity. I think something else is, we do all this research and you work so hard, but you don't always get the opportunity to actually share, some of your insights. So I'm feeling very privileged. Thank you.
Excellent. And we are really excited to share some of these insights, because I know from our conversations before, and you just telling me some of these areas was really, I went and did more reading around it. And I think we are in such a pivotal time in both South Africa and both in the world, where things are shifting, where what leadership looked like 20, 30 years ago is really being reevaluated, and we're looking for new models that creates a healthier, more sustainable society and organization. So I think this is really exciting research, and I think you also have the practical insights to have seen this happen in large organizations and essentially communities. So we're going to look at how self-identity affects leadership development, and how this is a fundamental building block. And obviously, you've done a lot of research, a lot of discussion. You've looked at examples in the corporate space and what's happening here. And in particular, what I would really like to have focus the discussion is, we want to build something more holistic around leadership development. We want people with different backgrounds, different insights to come into leadership. And we want to create a more inclusive leadership model. And I think these insights help us in as we were speaking the other day, is right from sort of childhood development that sets the foundation for how future leaders are built. So my first question today is, just give us some background from how a strong sense of your self-identity really forms the basis for how you step into a leadership role. And particularly, people will either step into it and be courageous enough to take this journey, while, you can give us some insight of when people don't step into it and when they don't feel like they have it in themselves. So give us some context to what you found.
Great questions. And I just want to tag onto, words you used earlier, which is, sustainable, and how we want these, our leadership spaces to be more inclusive. And I think inclusivity is such a critical part of sustainability. We're seeing it globally. If you are not in touch, example, with the people at the roots of businesses, of supply chains and all of that, it is going to unravel further down the line. So we want to be able to include as many voices, as many different people who make up part of this diverse, world that we live in. And the more that we do that, the richer we actually get, not just in bottom line, but also in practices and in how we're able to service customers and all of that. So I just wanted to emphasize that, I really see this as a critical part of the leadership development conversation going forward. Yeah. So just to answer your question, quite briefly. So maybe let me just give an overview of, the research and how I came to finding out some of the stuff here. So it was for my MPhil, like you correctly said, that I was doing with Gibbs. And my topic was in particular self-awareness and leadership identity and how the two influence each other, but specifically people from more marginalized groups like women. And the reason I chose the topic is because of obviously what I've just said, which is that I think it's so important, and I think I have a role to play in making corporates more inclusive. And I think leaders have a critical role to play because they influence culture, they build culture in organizations. So if that diversity is there in the leadership, then it's going to live in your culture. So I interviewed several leaders that are in an executive to senior management roles. And it was a narrative type approach. So it's open-ended. You tell me your story, probe here and there. And I got some really rich insights around how they believe that they have formed their leader identity, as well as how that has helped them to possibly move up the ranks in an organization. And very roughly, because it's very hard, they say similarity isn't correlation, but very roughly, the particular trend, and the literature is also telling us this, is that the younger you are, when you start to form that identity, when you start to see yourself as a leader, when you get that feedback from the environment that supports that confirms that. We talk about people make bids for leadership. So even in this conversation, I might say something that is kind of pushing us in a certain direction. If you confirm that and you agree with that and you're willing to, to play along, that confirms to me then that, I do have a degree of influence. I can shape the environment, etc. So the younger people are, when they build that sense of identity, it seems that the higher in leadership roles they go. So there's almost this link here, So I think I'll share with you, one of the people I interviewed said that from preschool, she saw herself as a leader, and she would, when they were playing, she would always choose the role of authority, and that was what was confirmed with her. So also in a very senior role in a very large organization actually at the moment, but it feels natural to her. It feels like this is who I've always been and always meant to be. And that's what the leader identity does. It gives you that sense of confidence, strength. It makes you pursue more development because you can do this. You want to get better at it. And it also just makes you so aware of what your strengths are.
Excellent. And I mean, that's really interesting because I mean, it would make sense because at that age, you're forming your personality, some of your core beliefs. So if you've already, that has been embedded in you, you will just seek more of that. And it, as you said, it just strengthens, and you will look for leadership positions, and that builds on that leadership identity. Very interesting.
100%.
And I mean, the question that I would be really interested in is, how, this talks back, particularly where we're looking at building a more holistic set of leaders in our world, and how's that, if you have that sense of self-awareness and identity, and particularly if you're coming from a more marginalized group or group that hasn't always been represented in mainstream leadership, how has that allowed you to overcome some of those challenges, some of those barriers where it's inherent in yourself or within the system? What is that, how does that contribute towards stepping into uncomfortable territory and taking on more and more leadership roles?
Absolutely. So, in a nutshell, I think it becomes almost that trampoline or that base in the spine that you're able to fall back on, even when you are in a context that we can describe as anything between hostile, because sometimes, when you are a non-dominant group member and you are in this group where the dominant profile is X, it can literally feel quite hostile. Like, you do not fit, you are not accepted, we do not embrace your ideas, your way of thinking, etc. So there are those environments where you feel like you stick out like a sore thumb. And then there
Yes.
are others that are more nuanced, where,
Mm.
you know, maybe for the most part, you know, it's quite professional. We have, you know, rituals and ways that we do things. So we there's an awareness at least around, you know, etiquette, etc., etc. So you're not sticking out like a sore thumb, but it's those smaller things that kind of let you know, you know, whether you get asked your opinion, whether things get run past you before, you know, decisions are made, etc. So it becomes the smaller, finer aspects that kind of just say to you, okay, you're not quite in, you're a bit of an outsider. Yes, yes, yes. So what happens with people who are experiencing, you know, any of these environments is that if you have come from an experience where you have this relatively strong sense of a leader identity, as much as you can get shaken, you can get a little bit sensitive, etc. But at your core, when you have to go to ground and find the strength within you, when you have to have a quiet moment, meditate, ask yourself, you know, what's actually going on here? How am I contributing to the situation? What can I do different, etc., etc.? You have the benefit of your previous experiences kicking in and just reminding you of who you are, who you have been, and how you have been accepted in the past, that you do have this agency, you do have this ability to influence, etc. So it's almost like you shake, but there's this thing, there's a net that's able to catch you. Versus
that trampoline, as you said.
Absolutely, that gives you that bounce back. Versus someone who possibly still has a shaky identity around their leadership. So maybe they haven't been affirmed, they haven't had positive experiences in the main, or maybe they've come, because this is another profile that was part of the interview groups, they only started leading in a leadership role. So the first time they saw themselves, experienced themselves, considered themselves to be a leader was in a formal management role. Also a different experience, because now what I picked up is that there's a lot more questioning, and there's something around, is this just me doing the technical job, or am I actually a leader, you know?
And I guess that's imposter syndrome comes into here, and the self-doubt.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And then, like you said, add to the mix now, I'm also not from the in group here. I'm a bit of an outsider. So my mannerisms, the way I speak, the ideas I come with, etc., aren't, you know, natural to the environment. So I also don't get that immediate confirmation, affirmation, etc., which then just leads to more doubt often, in terms of, you know, can I influence? Am I someone that can shape the environment? Do people listen to me, etc., etc.? And imposter syndrome is when that becomes a bit of a loop, and you can't get out of, you know, those doubts and those questions. And yeah, absolutely.
And there's those we don't realize it, but there are those systemic barriers that, you know, they're not in your face, but as you said, they're subtle. So it's like, as you were clarifying, having that strong self-identity and knowing your leader helps you persevere and step through when you are having those challenging moments. I mean, I remember myself going into an environment with engineers, and I was the only person coming from an education learning background, and the challenge of being in an environment that thought very differently to me, but, you know, having that sense of self and that I was here to do a certain thing and create change allowed me to, and it was very uncomfortable. So I can totally relate to how that is something that you have to fall back on, especially when you are coming with a different perspective, a different viewpoint. You are someone who's challenging the status quo, which is often needed in these environments.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so many variables to this. You know, sometimes it's young. I reflect on my own career. I started in a quite a heavily male-dominated environment. So when you talked about that engineering, so as much as I came in with the confidence of maybe schooling, of a family that saw me as a leader, you know, whatever tools and basket I came in with, but hitting this environment and finding, sure, one, I'm in the minority. Two, my voice is different in so many ways to the dominant voice, the voice that seems to get things done, make the decisions, gets listened to, etc. And then things like youth as well, because youth means you don't know yet, you don't have the experience, so we're taking a chance on you. So add that to the mix, you know. So you have all of these factors, and then the question starts to become then, you know, which do you believe more? Do you believe this environment and the cues it's giving you and what it's telling you, or are you almost able to remember that? No, man, I know. So some of the examples shared, I led a camp in high school, you know, and people lived. No one died on the mountain. I brought them back to safety, you know. I was the captain of a sports team. And I led, you know, us to certain victories, etc., etc. So it becomes this circle around those past experiences, giving you more confidence, which makes you want to have more experiences, which then gives you more effectiveness, and on it goes. And then the challenge with groups that aren't naturally included is to get them to that level of confidence or strength of identity that they can at least start the cycle, which is, I will put myself out there. I will take the chance. I will, you know, try and have the experience in the learning, and try then and draw on, you know, past experiences, etc. And so then our role becomes, as corporates who say we want a more inclusive environment, is one, awareness of these invisible forces and things at play, and just to be more intentional around when we bring people in that we know are going to be different to the system. You know, how do we set people up, those leaders up, to support them, give them the voice, amplify, you know? And it can be things as small as, you know, in a meeting, I know this is a very common one, you say your thought and there's no one really notices it. But if you have a sponsor in the room, someone who is intent, who believes in you and knows, and they know in their heart that they just need to get the rest of the people there to see what they see in you, then what they do is amplify what you just said. They say, did you know, oh, Lolly, you know what you said about this? I think there's just, you know, so much power to that. Let's explore that. And then over time, then you get to also build your credibility, and, you know, people buy in. So yeah.
It's fascinating. So having that mentorship, having that support, definitely, because you are in quite a, you know, someone who is stepping into that. It's quite a fragile space. So you do need to have something just to help you navigate that. And I mean, obviously, as you've mentioned, you know, having sponsorship, having a mentor, so that you can break new ground. I mean, my question goes, and in your work, like looking at leadership development and growing these leaders, and maybe they haven't had the benefit of coming from a home environment where they were given the opportunity to show leadership. I mean, what are some of the interventions that you would see, or what needs to happen, or what needs to happen differently so that we can bring more people from diverse backgrounds into a leadership space and stepping up to that?
Yeah. So one big piece of that in the literature, which becomes kind of a catch-22, is that the more people see people that they relate to and identify with in roles that they aspire to and that they want to be in, the more it builds their sense of confidence that they can also, you know, do this. As long as they're making, which is a very important part, is that as long as those people are making a success of it. Yeah. So when that happens, so the catch-22 then becomes, you have to start somewhere. So often we find then that we have, you know, a board, and we only have then the 2 Africans or the 1 female. So as much as that is signaling to the rest of the organization that if you're a female or you're an African, there is, you know, possibly room for you, it's not a strong signal. It becomes stronger when there's more people, different people, as well as when we watch those people being listened to, we watch them making the decisions, we're exposed to them being themselves. So one of the stories I really enjoyed was someone who shared that, as a young executive, they had the backing of, the senior executive, everyone. And then this crisis point came when they had to choose basically between prioritizing something to do with their family, a celebration, with deep meaning for the family,
yes, yes.
but not understood in the Western context.
Yes.
So it was that thing where, Deirdre, are you really missing this board
yes, yes.
meeting?
Why would you? Yes, yes, yes.
To go and do whatever this thing you're telling us about, but it was so important to that person culturally, and it had a significant name, etc., etc. And for them, it would mean that they are giving up almost their original identity if they didn't do that. So they chose that, they aligned with that. But in choosing that, aligning with that, and then the environment accepting that,
yes,
they then grew their identity as, I'm an African leader.
Yes, yes.
I bring this context, this richness. This is my contribution. This is my gift. And obviously then when they saw other people like them feeling a little bit conflicted, etc., they just opened up the space so much more. So small things like, this place the person was working at, there's certain colors that you wear because that's just, that gives a certain image and a certain,
yes.
And they were able then to step into their power and say, but I actually identify as African. And for me, that's a lot of color. It's a lot of pattern and print and this and that. And initially, okay, what's going on? But over time almost became the thing that distinguishes this person and opened up the environment as well for other people to do the same. So, yeah.
I think that's a lovely story. And I think with us looking at being more authentic, and that authenticity brings so many things with it. It brings creativity. That diversity creates innovation, different thinking around the world. And our world's complex and multi-layered, and bringing in different people. And the more authentic that you can be in that role, I also feel the more robust you are. And also in the more robust in handling crises. So that's a wonderful story. And I think if you even had to look, I mean, particularly in the South African context, to 10 years ago, to now, you're already seeing it. I mean, you're seeing it worldwide. And I guess our journey started a lot earlier around bringing in inclusivity and diversity. And now we can see how a world of just a one-dimensional is not able to cut it anymore.
Not at all. Not at all. And, being South African has so many contexts. And
yes,
it's interesting how you can be in one environment and almost be the aspired to profile, and then just one shift, like just literally drive 20 minutes outside of your normal, what you consider home. And it's a completely different environment, and you are perceived and experienced, quite differently. I mean, something that comes to mind, I was watching the elections yesterday and some of the party leaders being interviewed, something as simple as an accent and what that can do, signal for the different parties and how that's received. So yeah, I'm completely with you.
yes. I mean, the thing that I wanted to just go back to is role models and mentors. And those people who have taken those brave steps. And now how do we create more of that? To both to be a signal to, like what we embrace all of this, but also to guide young people through. And I also think it's so critical, because that's also how you're going to attract talent with new ideas, new thinking. What are some of the initiatives or interventions that you've seen that has had an impact?
So I'll definitely share some of my favorites, but I want to start off by saying I think you have to be intentional about it. Absolutely have to be intentional. If you're an organization and this isn't something that you are, writing into your policies, writing into your culture building initiatives, into your leadership development, et cetera, it's going to be very hard for people who are coming in, perceive or experience themselves as different, to feel that inclusivity. It really, really is. It's something that you work at and build on a constant basis. So one of the things that I'm a big fan of is formal and informal networks, and how how you as an organization can try and form those organically and non-organically as well, because in the networking, if you provide those opportunities, one, to get those different people in a room, make sure that people get an opportunity to be heard, et cetera. Mix your executives, your very senior executives, mix them with the young talent. Like, don't have this thing where it's just completely different. You can only ever see the CEO in the lift on the way to the parking lot, and there you are, starstruck. You don't know what to say to them. Instead, have opportunities where that interaction can happen, and it's legitimate and it's fine, and the person has the stage to do that. So that's one of the things. We talk about employee resource groups. So sometimes it is more around similarities. So sometimes a women's forum has a place. It delivers a need. It meets a need. It creates that sense of camaraderie, support. I have a space that I can be fully me and talk about what my challenges are freely without holding back and being seen as difficult, too transformational, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these labels that go with things. Yeah. So that's another very powerful one. And then I think informal networks as well, which is, I think, one that we overlook a lot. But there's a saying that, the people that play together stay together, and that's in couples and families as well. And it's exactly the same as work. So when we do this thing where we do everything around work, just work, we miss out on the opportunities for people to connect at a human level that has nothing to do with hierarchy, that has nothing to do with race, that has nothing to do. And you just realize, sure, Deirdre and I vibe, like, she gets me, I get her, So we have to create those opportunities as well. Back in the day, they used to have pubs at work, and you could literally pop out, and so I mean, we know what's happened there with drunk driving, and all sorts of things have happened, and things have become stricter, but we need to find other ways in which to do that. The virtual landscapes makes that 10 times more challenging. Definitely. I think, like we were saying earlier, so you need to consciously and intentionally create and make that time to go and bond with your team. Whereas it used to happen organically, naturally, the water cooler, out for a smoke, et cetera. And all of those things are critical for leaders to do and practice, as well as them to create, that environment that people can feel more included. So that's just one, which is the networking piece. The mentoring as well. I mean, that happens, I feel, a lot naturally, but you can also almost catalyze that. A lot more of that is happening. So you can have those sessions where you'll have your more experienced technical specialists in a particular area, and you bring in your younger ones as well, so that you're just creating that natural environment that they can share skills. And sometimes it's trade-offs. Hey, so you're more experienced, you're more professional, the whole route. But hey, Teams is not your friend, hey? Teams is not your best friend. Zoom isn't either, or something else. And that's what you can get back from this whole relationship. Or like, this is how you do the thing on TikTok. Like, let me help you. It's going to be easier than you sending out this questionnaire to 200 people. Let me set it up for you quickly, So there's so many opportunities, but we need to create those as leaders and as organizations. Yeah.
I think that's such a great point with obviously finding safe spaces where you can feel like you're held and there's similarity. And I guess also then finding, as you're saying, places where maybe it's not that comfortable, but you're being exposed to something very different, and you're opening your perspective. And then also in those mentoring relationships, I mean, and that can be it doesn't necessarily need to be one way, because what we're seeing, there's so many trends, there's so much technology, and with a younger group, the wisdom gained from someone is exchanged for what's happening, what's the trends, where do the technology, can that be used? And I think that's a great way of how we come sort of more robust in terms of a collective in sharing these ideas. No, but I mean, Lolly, it's just been such a fascinating topic, and I can see I've got so many other questions to come in. It's so, I mean, this is something that underpins everything that we do, and it gives a reason for why do we have to, I mean, exactly what you're saying is, why do we have to build this connection? Why do we have to have sessions, because work is not just transactional, and even more so now as we move into an era where humanity, our creativity, our connection, our collaboration become the element that's going to set us apart, is forming this and creating leaders who have a diverse perspective and bringing more of these into the fold. And I think particularly, we work a lot with banks. It's an area that is coming across a lot of change, and new leadership is required to navigate this space. So thank you so much for sharing all your research, also your knowledge, and I mean practical ways of how it can be implemented.
Thanks so much for the time, Deirdre. It actually went very fast.
I know.
I think they say, yeah, time flies when you're having fun. And I just think we all do literally have a role to play in how we build this country, and that starts from you to your family, to your workspace, to your community. How do you want to show up? What are you going to be purposeful around? And how are you going to lead in an inclusive way? How are you going to bring more people together? And like you said, so the big ask for banks at the moment is just innovation. Show us something different as customers, make our lives easier, anticipate our needs, etc., etc. And I think the organizations that fare the best at this are those that are made up of diverse groups of people, because then you're able to draw on all of these different ways of thinking and being to really relate to your customer base. So yeah.